So we're going to talk about dojos today. That's why we brought you in, because you're the dojo expert. What is a dojo? Most people have not been exposed to these and kind of seen how they work. So can you give people kind of an idea of what a dojo looks like?
Sure, yeah. So a dojo style engagement is typically 6 weeks. And within that 6 weeks, you'll have 1 to 2 coaches that are skilled in agile product and tech. And they really become immersed with the team to embrace learn by doing. It's a really, really fast-paced, fun experience that leaves you amazed at how much you can learn and retain because you're learning in the context of your space, and it tends to be stickier. And that's really that right there, that sort of learning that last message. That's one of the main reasons I fell in love with Dojo. It's no more of that shallow sort of, hey, this is a theory. Check, I've taught you that theory. No, I'm with you through this mindset shift, through this skill set shift to really capture that muscle memory. And we can do that in 6 weeks, which is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's where, so I've only had limited experience of coaching through a dojo, and that's one of the big things that I found is that building that muscle memory, and that's where a lot of people will try to shorten it and not do 6 weeks. And I'm really glad that, like I said, where I really engaged with the team, did it over 6 weeks, was because we got to build that repetition. They got to see what a good sprint planning looks like 12 times because we were running 2.5-day sprints. We got to build that repetition over and over again, which was really helpful, I think, for them to be able to kind of ingrain those concepts in.
Right.
So one of the things that years ago, it was Joel Tosi, I think, I was having a conversation about the dojo. Conversation about the dojo with Joel. And the light bulb for me was that it's not a thing that begins and ends in 6 weeks. It might be for a specific participant, but it's kind of it's a thing that the company decides we're either going to have this thing or we're not. Yeah. Sort of a permanent thing, and we're going to cycle people in and out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's 6 weeks of intensity, right? Where you're intentionally focused on building a skill set, going after a particular outcome or overcoming a challenge. But you're right. I mean, the hope is that it's a cultural shift and that the learnings last far after 6 weeks. I'm really keen on staying with the team, actually upwards to 90 days after the 6-week journey, to check in. I mean, not daily, but to kind of continue to keep that relationship warm to monitor any potential regression. Because once you go back into the wild, okay, that's the true test, right? The coaches are gone now. And how am I going to do sort of on my own? And, folks say muscle memory. I love riding bikes. I'm a big mountain biker. I'm a big geek. I have bike tattoos and everything. And so it makes sense to me to compare muscle memory and that sort of really deep learning to riding a bike. Like if you can remember back when we were all kids and we learned how to ride a bike, we didn't do it through a book or a PowerPoint. We had to fall and scrape our knees a few times to really understand that muscle memory and have that sort of physical attachment to the machine itself to really make this conscious thing we're learning ingrained into our subconscious. Now, even if it's been a few years, most of us can pick up a bike and still do it because it's deep in there. Like you said, it's ingrained.
Yeah, you get that. I remember like reading Joel's book, like talking about the difference between like tacit learning.
Yeah.
And then being able to, like I said, experience it. You retain that so much more. And by, like I said, building those repetitions over and over again. One of the things that like I've struggled with, because I remember reading about dojos years ago, reading like the case studies and stuff like that coming out of Target, and I had always wanted to do one, but I always knew from what I'd read that like I really like the team needs to be kind of closed off and in its own little ecosystem in order for this to be successful. And I've always struggled getting that buy-in from leadership to say, hey, for 6 whole weeks we're going to be going to work on some stuff. We're going to kind of pull them out of their daily work to go do this, and that's where I've always struggled to get the buy-in.
Yeah.
How do you go about getting buy-in from leadership and organizations in order to do something like this?
That's a really good question. So the first thing that I lead with, and it usually raises an eyebrow and gets them a little hooked and say, that's a really interesting concept, is this notion of learning by doing. There's no hello world work. We're not going off into a classroom and working on fictitious examples. We're actually pulling from your backlog that you already have to kind of the work you need to deliver on, right? So that usually catches their ear. Now, I follow that quickly up with, I'm going to be forthcoming. You just have to be honest that there's no way 1 to 2 people can become members of your team full-time for 6 weeks in a coaching stance and not interrupt delivery. It's going to happen, right? But are you willing to make that investment for a new, better status quo that could happen as early as 6 weeks and still be delivering in the 6 weeks? So if you have the top line priorities that have to get done, cool, we'll swarm on that. But I mean, there is a pullback, but they call it a slow down to speed up or slow down for learning. It's that kind of notion. So that's sort of how I've had success in navigating that conversation.
So you could structure a dojo to get better at really anything.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I made a dojo for dojo coaches.
Wow, that's meta.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so like, I mean, you could build one for like a technical audience, or so who's in a dojo typically? Like a manager?
So we've had some leadership dojos, so to help mentor people leaders especially, but like as a traditional dojo, if you're looking at agile teams, it's a core software development team. So you think developers, you think your analysts, Scrum Master, product owner, that type thing. And this is where it gets interesting. So like, what makes a good dojo coach? When we recruit, we look for deep mastery in those areas. You need to come with some empirical experience and street cred, because this is so fast paced. It's not something you can just Google and no, this is all tailored, real deal in the moment. So you have to really know your stuff at a deep level to properly coach. So yeah, it's typically an agile team like that to answer your question, and also to build on sort of that expertise we generally look for.